Hi guys, it's Crystal. I hope you guys are all doing well and that everything is going good for you. I know it's been a while. Again, I apologize. Um, the research I had to do for this case, guys, was just there were a lot of groups involved, so I tried to make sense of it, guys. I don't even know for sure if I made sense of it right. These are it's a secret society we're talking about today. We're talking about a cult, not just a cult, but a secret society. So that makes things complicated. And it's further complicated by the fact that there's no real understanding of their inner workings, or at least as far as I could tell. But anyways, that's what we are going to be doing. If you're new to this channel, like I said, my name's Crystal. I do Canadian true crime or true crime with a Canadian twist from time to time. I also do international crimes, usually ones that are recommended to me or ones that I have had an interest in. Sometimes I do it just to show the differences in the judicial system as well. So if that sounds like something you guys want to get behind, I hope you guys will hit that old like button. I hope you'll subscribe. Ring the notification, could work, it might not, and leave me some comments. You already know I'm going to say it if you've been here before, particularly about this case. This is a strange case. We're in Canada, but we're also in Switzerland and France, so we're kind of all over. I won't be giving as many of the area details as I normally do, guys, just because we're not spending an extensive amount of time in one area. I hope that makes sense. So hopefully that sounds like something that you guys like. And if you do choose to leave comments, please no hate. There's enough hate out there in the world today. All we're doing is just talking, guys. That's it. Your theories might be different from mine. You guys might know a little bit more about organizations like this than I do. I know general cult hierarchy. I'm pretty sure most of us do from things that we've watched. This is a secret society though, so it's a little bit more difficult. But also, this particular cult had two leaders, not just one. That's really a big difference. Well, I'm going to say two leaders. You'll figure it out. And if you guys are returning subscribers, you guys already know how much I love you and how thankful I am that you guys choose to listen to me whenever I appear on screen. So I thank you for that. So like I said, today we're discussing a cult. There's not as many Canadian cults that I could find, but I always knew I was going to talk about this one. Almost 10 years ago now, I think it's almost 10 years ago now, Maclean's magazine put out a magazine on... It wasn't just on cults, it was like major crimes in Canada. And this was the other one that I read about. So not only did I learn about Rocktario there, I learned about this. So today we're talking about the Order of the Solar Temple. The Order of the Solar Temple is also known as the Ordre du Temple Solaire. I hope I'm saying it right, guys. So first we're going to talk about the first leader. His name is Joseph de Montbrio, M-A-M-B-R-O, Joseph de Montbrio. And he was born sometime in 1924, guys. They never actually pinpointed his exact birthday or really anything about his early years. I just know that he was definitely born in 1924. He did for sure graduate high school, but he never went to college. I want you guys to keep that in mind. We're going to get into that at some point. He never graduated college. It looks like he may have apprenticed in some things like clockmaking and jewelry making. They did talk about that. But one thing that's certain about him is he does seem to have an inquisitive mind. He's not book smart. He's more people smart, and there's a reason for it. He, at a young age, well, younger age, you know, in his 20s, decided that power and money were really a worthwhile thing to him. He wanted to be able to control people. So sometime in 1956, when he's about 28, it seems like, he joined an occult group. This was probably due to the fact that he was starting to develop, or he had been for some time, an interest in the occult and mysticism. And the group that he chose to join was called the Ancient, I want to get it right, guys, Ancient Mystical Order of the Rosicrucis. This is actually an offshoot of another, probably better known group, the Rosicrucians. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong, guys. I'm pretty sure it's the Rosicrucians. Okay, so the Rosicrucian, their traditions actually date back to about 1500 BCE. They were practiced by the ancient Egyptians. They were then brought over to ancient Greece. From there, they went over to the Holy Roman Empire. And from the Holy Roman Empire, they made their way to the Middle Ages, medieval times, in probably, I would say, Europe itself. And people seemed to really enjoy this. This is, you know, it was like a newer way of thinking at that point in time too. It was a different type of religion that more focused on, it wasn't just the scientific world, but it was more focused on religion and the two of them together. It's apparently described as people who, air quotes guys, people who joined the group would gather to study the mysteries of creation, end quote. So, you know, this seemed to be something that he really wanted to partake in. And at about 1600, guys, the group started legally, or started to become, the Rosicrucians. It seems like that's when they developed their name. All they would do was, like most secret societies, most people would not know you were a member. It was very, very needed for people to keep their silence. They had to remain anonymous and covert, and they would meet at special meeting places that were only known to them. These are called lodges. You'll find that in a lot of the occultic religions that we're going to talk about. Yeah, there's more than one, sorry guys. They're often called lodges. So basically, it would be like their form of church, guys. It's their form of meeting place. And for a long time, they did not write anything down. Everything was passed on to the next member by word of mouth. It wasn't until 1909 that the Rosicrucian teachings were starting to be written down. So really, it was only last century, guys, that they actually started to write down what was going on. Now, their traditions can be found in written form, but only members can find them. As far as I know, I don't know. If you guys can find them, let me know. So they're basically there to study mysticism. This really was something that Demonbrio seemed to like, or at least he put forward that he liked. He may have done it for another reason. So Rosicrucian studies are actually devoted to major philosophical and mystical ideals. They want to study things like the divine, creation itself, the origin of the universe, structure of matter. That's where scientific meets into it. The concepts of time and space, laws of life. They study the human soul, the goal of evolution, phases of consciousness, psychic phenomenon, and the mysteries surrounding death and afterlife. That's what they are steeped in. There's also an aspect of alchemy involved in it too. That's what they do. But they also practice things like meditation, relaxation, how a person can enter into their own consciousness. And like I said, spiritual alchemy. It's very strange. I'm not quite sure what spiritual alchemy is. Maybe that almost sounds like telekinesis to me, or, you know what I mean? Like making an object appear because you said. I know that alchemy itself was turning regular metals or things like that into pure metals like gold, right? But I can't say for sure. Sorry guys, this is why it gets out of my head, because I understand the concepts, but I know philosophy, but I'm not great in philosophy. I'm more concrete minded, which is very strange for me to say because I don't view myself that way, but I need more facts. So Rosicrucians actually have members worldwide. There's headquarters in, I would assume, every single continent, except probably Antarctica. But they have members worldwide. They do have regular meetings now. They also have conventions. They wouldn't have before, but they do have them now, so that members can get together and talk about various topics more freely with each other. Apparently, Benjamin Franklin, Sir Isaac Newton, and Edith Piaf, the singer, the French singer, Je regrette rien, were all involved in the Rosicrucians. They were all Rosicrucians. The ancient mystical order of the Rosicrucis, which is what de Mombro belonged to, is just, like I said, a sect of this. They're Rosicrucians, but it's an offshoot. You have to have a staunch belief in both the scientific physical world and the ways it can be manipulated, both using science and spirituality. So it's a mix of both. It's concrete facts mixed with spirituality. So, like I said, it appealed to him. He was gung-ho. He started paying his dues, I would assume, moving up the ranks. And by 1969, he was actually one of the leaders of a lodge. He wasn't a leader in the Rosicrucians, but he was one of the leaders of the lodges. And he stayed there. This would be in Nimes, France. And he stayed there until about 19... Sorry, guys. I'm not quite sure when he became a leader for the lodge. He stayed there until 1969. But he was, at one point in time, a leader of the lodge in Nimes, France. So he was born in rural South France. That's all they said about it. So he was born in the south of France. He is French, so he joined one of the lodges in France. So by 1970, he gave up his career in the business world, and we're going to get to that, and decided to become a full-time lecturer. Just going around talking to people about the occult and mysticism. I guess this must have been a big business back then, guys, because it sounds like a lot of people were involved in this. He would just lecture on these topics. And at this point in time, he chose not necessarily to focus on the occult and mysticism. He chose to go the New Age route. This was a burgeoning thing in the 70s and 80s, guys. A lot of people were turning to New Age in order to heal themselves. More people were becoming less spiritually, as in God-based. They were coming into a time where they wanted to focus on their inner selves and how that could lead them to it's hard to say. They had a belief in a higher power. There you go. So it's a little bit different from that. So a New Age movement, yeah, we're going to have to talk about that too, guys. So a New Age movement is the belief that one must look forward to a new age of light and love in the coming eras, and to reach this goal through personal transformation and healing. So this was the basic tenet, and it spread quickly, like I said, through the occult and mysticism cultures back then, and they decided that they wanted to adopt parts of this practice. The New Age beliefs were a belief in reincarnation, guys, astrology, psychics, and the fact that many objects, basically all objects that we can see, that we wouldn't ascribe living attributes to, such as rocks, guys, trees, all things that are part of nature, are actually living beings with a soul. It teaches that everything is consciousness, that everybody has the power to be God, or like a God. That consciousness can be used to achieve the perfection of the self, because think of Scientology, guys. We are not perfect beings. We have habits and traumatic life events that we have to overcome in order to be perfect beings. That's what we're trying to achieve. That's what they're trying to achieve in New Age philosophies. You can only do this if you're able to overcome those traumatic life events and those habits. And then you will, once you've overcome them, you'll be the perfect self. So in 1973, he started, the Center for the Preparation of the New Age. And this was in Annemasse. I hope I'm saying it right. Annemasse, France. So his lectures were gaining him members, guys. Like I said before, he is not formally educated like we would know. He's more people smart. He picks things up. It seems like he has the ability to pick things up. He seems like he was probably an intellectual guy. He just didn't go to school formally. So his lectures were gaining people that wanted to join his organization, but not enough. There was something off-putting about him. This was his major problem. He lacked charisma, he lacked charm, and a lot of people found him to be not approachable. He was kind of a super authoritarian guy. I'm not sure how he was at the beginning, but he's become later described that way. What he wanted most of all when he's forming these orders, though, not to fool yourself, guys, it wasn't necessarily about the religion. It was about the power that being the leader over these people could gain him, and about the money. He wanted the money. So in 1976, he then established a communal group, a living together group, which he called La Pyramide, and this was in Geneva, Switzerland. So at some point in time, he must have gone to Switzerland. I can't pinpoint it, guys. At some point in time, he went there. And it was here that he started to claim the members of his various organizations, because he'll have many. He was telling people in La Pyramide that he was both an incarnation of Jesus and an incarnation of Akhenaten. I'm sure you guys are aware of who Akhenaten was. I think he was one of the kings in the later dynasties in ancient Egypt, guys, but don't quote me on that. I always mix those up. His son was actually Tutankhamun, and his wife was Nefertiti. He was responsible for a marked difference in religion at that point in time. He decided that instead of being multiple gods, multi-gods, like we know when we read ancient Egyptian history, he decided that it should be monogod, one god. And the god he chose was the sun god. So for a time, he had the people in Egypt who weren't used to it, but he did have the people in Egypt just worshiping one god. So Demonbreun is telling people that he's both Akhenaten and Jesus himself. I don't know. No, actually it wasn't Jesus. Sorry, guys. He was claiming that he was Moses, the prophet Moses. Yeah. He also said that he was a member of the Great White Brotherhood. Before you think it's racist, because I also thought that, guys. I was not. I was like, whoa, he's telling people he's part of this. The Great White Brotherhood is something different. It's very much beyond my ideals to think of this, but the Great White Brotherhood is basically has the belief, or at least they tell people they have the belief, that they are perfected beings, okay, of a great power who spread their word through a human host. It's almost, okay, think about a prophet. A prophet, this is why I said we were going to bring this into it. A prophet says they directly hear messages from God. This goes one better and says that the God, the spiritual being, actually enters their body and uses them as a vessel to teach. So he claimed that he was one of these perfected beings. Yeah, I know. As the group grew, one of the things I do know that they did was actually, or he did, was start to arrange marriages within the group, because he thought that these marriages would produce special children. And he needed these special children because he told people his own daughter, yeah, he made stories about his kids too, but he told people that his own daughter, her name was Emmanuel, was actually a cosmic child, and she was born of immaculate conception. Yes, he said that it was like a Virgin Mary type instance, and she was born that way, and as such, she was a cosmic child, and these special children that these couples would produce were supposed to help her some way in her cosmic journey. I have no idea what her cosmic journey is. None of that was explained, but this is apparently what he told people. So however smart and confident he was, though, like I said before, guys, he just didn't have the charm or charisma to bring people in. That is one of the really different aspects of this, because most of the time we have one leader. They usually have a second-hand man, right? Think about Manson. Manson had Tex Watson. Demonbreun was only half a man. he only had half of what was needed, I guess, to start a cult. I don't want you to make any mistake. We're talking about two leaders, but he technically had more power. I don't even know if the second leader realized that that Demambro was kind of using him too. But we'll get into that. So anyway, he needed people. Another reason why people were so reluctant to join with him as the leader is because he was a complete and total fraud. Remember how I said he gave up working in the business sector? Well, apparently he was going around telling people he was a psychologist and he could help them get over their traumas. He could help them. He would give them psychotherapy. He in no way went to college. I don't think he ever even had an interest in the actual study of psychology. He was just telling people that so he could get to know their inner workings, right? Maybe he was using some of what they were telling him as part of his philosophies, thinking that it would bring people in. But anyway, he was going around telling people that he was a psychologist. In fact, he was described as, quote, a confident trickster who made a successful career out of masquerading as a psychologist, end quote. So he was able to have people believe he was a psychologist, and he did treat people, unfortunately. But eventually he was found out, and at that point in time, he was arrested for fraud and also breach of confidentiality. This made people kind of question him. Why are you lying to us? So he just wasn't able to attract that many people. And of course, at this point in time, that's not good enough for him. He wants more money, more power. The only way to get that is more members. He's basically a megalomaniac in a suit, if that helps you. So like I said, he was very good at reading people, kind of like Charles Manson once again. He could sit there and talk with you and get to know your wants, your needs, what you're looking for in life, and then try to manifest himself as the person that could help you solve that could help you reach those goals. But he just really was not charismatic or believable enough to people. At this point in time, he knew he needed someone to more or less help him out. And that person is our second leader. His name is Luc Jouret. Jouret. Some people would call it Jouret, or I'm just used to calling him Jouret, so that's what I'm going to call him. Luc Jouret was actually much younger. He was born October 18th of 1947, and he was actually born in what was formerly Zaire, Kikwit, actually, what was formerly Zaire and is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He was born there, and his family lived there for a little while. Sometime in the 1950s, they actually decided to go back to his parents' homeland in Belgium, and that's where he stayed for a while. He actually attended the Free University, which sounds kind of nice, in Brussels. He had an interest in medicine. So yeah, he's fairly intelligent, guys. And in 1974, thereabouts, he actually did receive an actual degree. He did earn an actual degree in medicine. While he was in college, though, he was actually on the police radar because he joined a communist youth group. I don't think he stayed there for very long. He was a lot like Demambro, but maybe even more so because he's constantly wanting to learn. It seems like he wants to learn about everything. First, he had an interest in medicine. Then he has an interest in communism. He just wants to learn as much as he can. And I'm sure he was like a lot of people at that point in time, just trying to find their fit in the world, their space in the world, and a spirituality that would appeal to them. Regardless. So he did go there for a little while. And you guys know, like in the 50s and 60s, communism, not so good, right? It's the Cold War era. The Western world, what's known as the Western world, was fighting against communism. The fact that he, who was considered part of the Western world, was opting to join a group like this put him on the police radar. That's all that was said. But he didn't really do much wrong at this point in time. So, like I said, he graduated in 1974. And in 1976, he actually joined the Belgian army for a while and became a paratrooper there. So he did help out his country. But he was always searching for something. So after the army, he actually developed an interest in holistic medicine. He had become disillusioned with scientific medicine, the actual, oh man, it's so hard because I don't want to offend anybody. Instead of like healing the self and, you know, using herbs and certain other treatments to heal ailments, he went from doing concrete things like assessing people that would need operations. I'm not quite sure what kind of medical doctor he was, handing out prescriptions, things like that. He went from that to wanting to practice holistic medicine. And he actually did earn a degree in homeopathy. As such, he decided to open his own clinic in France. He had, at this point in time, relocated to France. And at this point in time, he was kind of into the New Age religion. He found that a lot of his beliefs and ideals were more along the New Age religion. He felt that that was a better fit for him. And homeopathic medicine fit him better in this regard as well. So he, like I said, he became a licensed homeopathic practitioner, and he was practicing in France. At this point, though, his job enabled him, and he must have had money, guys, to travel around the world lecturing. He would also lecture on the positives of holistic medicine and New Age philosophies in general. He would go about talking, just having lectures to people who would come and listen to him. And he was very charismatic, guys. You know it. He was charming. Seems like most people liked him. So he settled in Annemasse, France, and he opened his own homeopathic practice office there as well. But he was still lecturing on holistic medicine and things of that nature, and the paranormal. Apparently he started talking about that too. So here's where the influence of the occult is starting to come into him too. He was contacted by several groups or sects or societies. I'm not going to say the Rosicrucians because it wasn't them, but like the Rosicrucians, various other sects that were practicing New Age religion contacted him to come and lecture about homeopathy and things of that nature. One of these groups was called the Foundation of the Golden Way. It's also been called the Golden Way Foundation or just the Golden Way. One of the groups that contacted him was this group. And who was their leader? At this point in time, Joseph de Mombro. Yeah, that's right. He started a lot of different groups. And there you go. That stories vary on how the two of them started the cult though, guys. So I'm not 100% sure on that. There's actually 3 different stories. Some said that the Order of the Solar Temple actually came about because it was a marriage of the ideals of Joseph de Mombro and Luc Jouret. So de Mombro's sect at that point in time was called the Foundation Golden Way, or Golden Way Foundation, and he formed that, it seems like about 1978. So it's not like he's amassing a lot. See what I mean? He can't keep members. And this group was actually built on the ideals of the Knights Templar. We're going to get into that. But he really only started these things as a way to make money and control people. That's basically what he was doing. According to these sources, Jouret at that point in time belonged to a group called the Arch. And the two met in the late 1970s because de Mombro had seen him speak, I guess. And they figured they had a lot in common. You know, the two of them got to talking. They had a lot in common, or else de Montbro manipulated it, so it seemed that way. And they decided to join forces and come up with their own group at that point. Now, some sources say the two met because, like I said, Jure was touring as a lecturer and an inspirational speaker, and he actually spoke at one of the Golden Way functions. And this was how the two met. Some say that he was an actual member of the Golden Way Foundation, and de Montbro could see his charm and charisma and his intelligence as well, and figured that that was the face he needed. He needed him as the public face. De Montbro pulled all the strings behind the scenes. He was responsible for the tenets, the indoctrination, leading meditations, things of that nature. But Jure was the one who could bring members in. He was charismatic enough. He didn't have any fraud charges at that point in time. He was intelligent. He must have been a great orator, like he needs to be. So de Montbro thought to himself, yeah, I can make this guy the head. That's why I said there's two leaders. But at this point in time, it kind of seems like de Montbro's just putting him out there. So he's in charge of recruiting new members and kind of scanning them, let's just say, to see if they end up being people that they want. Now, make no mistake, these members had to have money, though. So regardless, some say that this went on from 1979 to 1989, this Golden Way Foundation. I really don't have the numbers for you. I'm not sure. But it does appear that for sure, by 1984, that's the date most articles give, the Order of the Solar Temple was on the move, was on the go. So, like I said, obviously this group is a secret society, guys, so I don't know a lot about how it functions or all of their rituals. I know some of the rituals are kind of based on like Freemason beliefs as well, and I know very little about the Freemasons, but they're that secret. I think you get it. So I know, I do know some of the group's belief, like I said, were based on the Knights Templar ideals, okay, mixed with New Age philosophies, mixed with God, mixed with aliens, and other New Age beliefs. So they're basically mixing as many traditions as they possibly can into this. And there are reasons why. So they believed in, quote, the spiritual over the secular, which is very different because the Rosicrucians believe that most things are science-based. They also believe in God, but do you see what I mean? Very different. And that Jesus would eventually return to the earth as, quote, solar God king, end quote. And they also mixed in survivalist ideals into the group. So according to the group, their basic goal was to reestablish within the world the old school notions of authority and power. So it seems like a patriarchy. I think we're talking Old Testament here, where the man was the head of the family, was the ruler. Everything he said goes. Women and children were there to listen to him type deal. Man was the man, basically. But they wanted to marry that with the idea that they were also the people that would arrange for the second coming of Christ when he came as the solar God king. And they also wanted to merge all Christian religions with Islam. That's all they said at that point in time. They didn't mention Buddhism or anything like that. But I think their major concept was that they wanted to merge all religions with de Montbro as their leader. Well, de Montbro, and Jure as their leader, if you will. So members had to believe without a doubt that the 14th century order of the Knights Templar was still in existence. We'll get into that in a second. They also had to believe that the Knights Templar had just merely gone into hiding, and that their philosophies would come out at some point in time. They also took certain practices. Like I said, I'm not really sure how they knew them, but whatever, I guess they knew into history from the Knights Templar and built them into this religion. They actually, at one point in time, told members that they were both reincarnations of Christ anyway, and that they were either reincarnations of the original Knights Templar members or that they were actually Knights Templar members. So lots of lies going on here. So cult rituals brought together early Christian concepts mixed with New Age practices. It doesn't seem like they would marry very well together, but anyway, that's what they did. And they mixed in rituals from other secret societies they know, like the Rosicrucians, like the Knights Templar, and like the Freemason, because a lot of their ideals are the same. I'm not really sure how it works, guys, because like I said, early Christianity is more about the patriarchy. New Age is about trying to perfect yourself to achieve that higher level of consciousness. You believe in a power. It just doesn't seem, it's more individualistic. So it doesn't seem like they marry well together, but that's what they were purporting. So this is where it gets like really, really murky, guys. There is one or several sources that said that from 79 to 89, they actually formed a group called the International Organization Solar Tradition. And it was from that group that they harvested their members for the Order of the Solar Temple. That it was kind of like their weeding process, if you will. Some don't even mention this basic group at all, this first group at all. So I can't be 100% certain on it, guys. All I can say for sure is that the cult was definitely up and running by 1984. So like I said, I've mentioned the Knights Templar several times, and they were pretty integral to the cult ideals. I'm not sure if you guys know a lot about them. I didn't either. I knew they were they were formed somewhere around 1118 to 1119 AD. It would be AD. And their initial, this was after the First Crusade, and they used to be, most of them used to be soldiers that had fought in the crusade. They were created to protect Europeans who were traveling around the areas at that point in time. Think of Robin Hood, right? All the people that were like out to get you. They'd rob you, or they could murder you, or they could steal your cargo, etc., etc. The Knights Templar were there to make sure that these particular people would be able to get from one area of Europe to another area without being molested in any way. There we go. So that's what they were. They were guards, if you will. They were well known as the most elite fighting force in Europe as well. And they had very strict codes of conduct that they had to follow. There was an original 25 laws that they had to follow, and it eventually became 68 laws that they had to follow. So the Knights Templar was made up originally of a lot of members from really wealthy families. Therefore, the Knights Templar had a large coffer, let's just say. They had a lot of money. This kind of makes the Pope a little mad because he wants the money, but they have a lot of money. They also took part in every major military campaign in Europe for the time that they existed. And they eventually became the center of both political practices and financial practices. But they were supposed to live by a certain code. So they have this money and they don't really have a lot to do with it, because one of the codes that they had to follow, other than chivalry, right, was poverty and chastity. They couldn't have anything to do with women. I'm not really sure how they were supposed to keep the bloodline going. It looks like they just adopted new members, but they were supposed to stay basically abstinent, guys. So eventually they became the legendary fighters we know them from. Yeah, they had to take one of their major tenets was that they had to fight for their faith at all costs. Okay, they could use whatever amount of violence they needed to, as long as it was in the name of God. That was one of the things they had to follow. They also had a, quote, Grand Master. That's what they called him. So he was a Grand Master. He would lead all the different sects, and he was seen as their supreme ruler. This would also make the Pope mad, because God is supposed to be your supreme ruler. And these people are supposed to be faithful. They're turning a little bit more secular. So that's going to bother people. They had to be of noble lineage, I guess, too. And they had a certain uniform, usually the white tunic, from what I can remember. And I think there was a red cross on it. They had to have their beards kept a certain length. They had to wear their hair a certain way. They could only ride certain horses. There were a lot of rules that they had to follow. The more people that joined the Knights Templar, the wealthier they became. And of course, like I said before, this pissed the Pope off. He wanted their money. It's the Pope. He wanted to be the richest. The Holy Roman Empire was supposed to be the richest, not these knights. So he decided to go about, I think it was in the, oh, I'm sorry, guys, I didn't write it down. Must have been in the later, was it the 14th or 15th century? If any of you guys know, let me know. Anyway, he eventually decided to put them on trial on bogus charges. Things like, it would be things like corruption and stuff like that. And he actually forced these members through torture to confess to things that they hadn't done, kind of like the witch trials, the Salem witch trials. And then most of them were killed. There are people that believe that all of them were killed, and they didn't die a very good death. They died a fiery death, let's just say. And there's two trains of thoughts on that, guys. There's a staunch belief that no, all of them were wiped out and it doesn't exist anymore. But there's another belief that the 14th, a couple of them managed to escape, and they kept it going that way through secrecy. That's why it had to become a secret society. No one knows for sure if it still exists. No one can say 100% sure if the Knights Templar still exists, even now. Okay, so the group itself, we're talking about the Order of the Solar Temple. I'm sorry, guys, it's just so much information. Was built on a hierarchy system. So there are 3 tiers that you have to go through to become, you know, a perfect being, so to speak. There is the bottom level, and those guys are generally the people that are recruiters, right? They're going to go out and proselytize and try to find new members. But you have to go through 3 levels of the first tier in order to get to the second level, which also has 3 tiers, and the third level, which also has tiers, and so on and so forth. In order for you to be, you have to go through levels as well. So once again, sort of like Scientology, guys. This is just, it reminds me so much of it. So you have to go through that. The bottom group was called the Amanta Group or the Amanta Club. It may also be known as the Brothers of Parvis. I've heard different sayings about that. So like I said, these are the guys that go and lecture and try to draw in new members. The next level was the Archadia Club. It may also be called the Knights of the Alliance. These members knew more of the secrets. They don't know all of them, but they know more of the secrets that are involved in the group, and they're allowed to join in certain rituals. They were also promised the reward of, quote, coming closer to a higher consciousness, end quote. These people that were on the second tier had to be handpicked by the elders of the group. And of course, like for every tier and through every level, you had to pay more money. That's why I said it reminds me of Scientology. You know what I mean? Like if Tom Cruise was starting out in that, he'd be up on the higher tier because obviously he's got the money. Whereas if, I don't know, I guess I joined, I'd be the low end of the tier. See what I mean? So the last level of the order to be achieved was called the International Knighthood Organization. It may also be known as the Brothers of the Ancient Times. And the people who had made it to this rank were almost perfect. Okay, there is another level, but it's not. It is, but it's not. We'll get into that. You had few bad habits at this point in time, or few traumas to work through. You were basically perfect. They were allowed to take part in all of the rituals. You had to be initiated into every tier and into every level on the tier. You were just reinitiated over and over again. But they were involved in the secret initiation rituals as well that the group had, and they had access to publications that tier 2 and tier 1 wouldn't have had access to. And of course, these are the people that could, quote, afford to move up. That's the weeding process, basically, guys. Oh, you only have this much money? Well, give us all that money. You're on level 1. Level 2, oh, you have a bit more money, blah, blah, blah. It's basically what it's built on. So there was an inner circle. It's an inner circle of that last tier. I'm sorry, guys. It's so confusing, I know. This was actually made up of the leaders, right? Demambro and Juret, and the people who actually donated the most money. Those guys would be in part of the inner circle. They were actually called the Synarchy, I hope I'm saying it right, of the temple, and they referred to themselves as the elder brothers of the Rosy Cross. So they were the elders. And they were, of course, responsible for leading the lodges, and having the meetings and doing the rituals, all these things. The lodges, now these lodges actually grew to not being just based in Switzerland. Their home base at that point in time was Zurich, Switzerland. But they were not just there. At this point in time, due to the lecturing and things of that nature, the group had also spread into France, which makes sense because that's where Demambro was from. And Jaurès had been there for a while too, right? So it makes sense. So they were also in France, possibly Spain. I'm still not certain on that. And Canada. I told you it was coming in. So all of these lodges have certain altars in them. They also, if you were part of the inner sanctum, it sounds like, but I think certain other members got to do it too. It was only during the rituals though. They had a specific uniform which looked a lot like the Knights Templar uniform. And I believe they also had hoods too. It was a white uniform with white hood. And they also had special symbolic instruments. I have no idea what those are. So elders were responsible also though for hiding away any gifts or money that the group was given, that the members of the group had given them, hiding it away from the people, but also from banks and stuff. Yeah, we'll get to it. There's a distrust with all that stuff too. So in order to advance through each level, you had to pay more. You had to pay an initiation fee anyway. I think you had to pay a fee to go and see the meetings. But on top of that, you had to pay each time you were initiated, and then you'd have to pay each time you leveled up as well and reached a different tier. And there was a mandatory tuition fee to pay anyway. Yeah, there's a lot. Also, you were supposed to, as far as I know, when you hit every level and when you hit a new tier and through every level in that tier, you had to give special gifts to Demambro and Jaurès. Money. So they were also, people were let in on all the secrets for all this money, and they were promised salvation when Jesus returned as the solar king, God king. People started defecting early at this point in time because they're like, this doesn't make sense. It's a lot of money. So like I mentioned before, they did eventually have quite a lot of members, guys, at least 400. That's quite a few for a cult. They had about 400 by 1990. And they were made up of the most wealthy and prominent people in that area. They had mayors in there. They had public civil servants. They had an Olympian at one point in time. Things like that would all join and be members. And the family members of these people later on, the family members of the members, I'm sorry guys, would later go on to say that they were very surprised to learn that their family member had anything to do with a group like this. They couldn't believe it. These were intelligent men. These were intelligent men and women. These were people that had money. These were people that were well known. But the thing of it is that Jaurès, as the face of it, was always dressed in business suits, right? They only dressed in the uniform for rituals. Was always dressed in business suits. He always looked professional, and he gave off that air. So all of the other members would also dress in business attire. Nobody would be able to tell. So by the mid-80s, the group had moved its headquarters to Quebec. There are specific reasons for it, which we'll get into in a bit. It was rumored that when the group was there, they started to partake in various plots targeting who else? The government. That's when you know you're in a cult. When they're starting to teach you the rhetoric that the government is bad, we need to amass weapons, we're going towards the end of days, things like that. That's when you know. There are other practices before, like isolation, indoctrination, things of that nature. But I'm just saying, where the ideals of the group change from what would be a collective ideal to more just doing what the leaders say, unquestioning, things like that. But apparently they were threatening specific Quebec government agencies. They'd call them up and threaten them. And they were suspected of bombing some Hydro-Quebec transmission towers. They were suspected of bombing them. And also plotting to destroy indigenous reserves. They were all suspected of this. Now, many European members at that point in time, or at this point in time, had actually come over from Europe to be in Quebec. Jaurès had started to telling his people, he was always, in his lectures, at least for sure when he joined up with de Montbreau, he started telling people that the end of days would eventually arrive, and there were certain ways that you could ensure more or less that you would become one of the saved. So it's not like he wasn't preaching end of days rhetoric before. It's just now this is when it starts to really hammer down. He told his followers that they would, quote, be able to shed their earthly bodies and they'd meet again through death voyages, end quote. Yeah, see, they're talking about death too, you know. So by the late 80s and early 90s, things, like I had mentioned before, had definitely become more cult-like in structure, isolation, communal living. Communal living isn't always a bad thing, guys. It's just at this point in time, they're telling them they can't contact their families and things like that. They had to give over sums of money, whatever sum of money they possibly could. They had to follow various rules. The tenets, which was about New Age philosophies and taking back authoritarian power and control and believing in God and things like that, were changing to more suit de Montbreau and Jaurès and what they actually wanted, because de Montbreau, he wanted power and money, right? He wanted power, money, and control. But at this point in time, Jaurès was becoming pretty tarnished as well. I'm sure he wanted money. I'm sure he wanted some of the power, but he was more focused on sex. He wanted women. So there you go. That's why I said I think de Montbreau was more head leader, let's just say. Like I said, they're suspicious of governments and their authority or authoritarian people in general. They want to start amassing guns. The end of days is coming, blah, blah, blah. So Jaurès started telling people that, this is going to be confusing too, that he was actually the, quote, third reincarnation of Christ, end quote, even though the second coming of Christ hasn't happened. Yeah, but that's what he was told them. And this gave him the authority over the other members, but it also enabled him to work some of his magic, if you will. He would say that he needed to have relations with one female member before he could do any ritual, any meeting, anything, any talk in front of the group, because it gave him, quote, the spiritual strength to do his duties, end quote. So he's completely obsessed with sex at this point in time. I'm sorry, guys. So he has to go, and every single time before whatever ritual, he would go out and pick a female, whoever it might be, and have to have relations for them so that he could be strong in his spiritual power. So his lectures had originally focused on things like love and biology, but they pretty soon started to add, like I said, that end of the world stuff, and it was going to end due to various environmental catastrophes caused by humanity, but also some that were natural. Volcanoes. He blamed volcanoes. I don't know. He would tell the followers that if they followed his and DeMombro's solutions to the problem, that they would be among those that would survive after the end of days. Since he had a medical degree, people believed him. He is intelligent. He is a doctor. They're believing in him. So at this point, like I said, he was basically just in the cult for sex, and DeMombro was there for power and money. There is a show on Crave, if you guys have never watched it before, and it is called When Women Sin. It's actually called New Eden, and it's a comedy, guys. It really is funny, and it's set in Canada. And it's about these two women who basically think they can form a cult and all the things that they do to do this. So it just reminds me of this case a little bit. They're not actually, it doesn't appear like they have any real spiritual leanings at this point in time. They just want to manipulate people. Now, apparently at this point in time, he and DeMombro would break up certain couples because one of the two of them, DeMombro got sexual favors too. One of the two of them would have their eye on the wife, but I guess it was affairs must have been frowned upon because they didn't talk about those things. So what DeMombro and Jarrett would tell the couple was that they were no longer, quote, cosmically compatible, end quote. And then the couples would separate, right? They were induced to separate, and at that point in time, Jarrett and DeMombro would have sex with the newly single woman. That was one of their things. So the cult focused now at this point in time on the fact that life was merely a journey to death, and the end of days was going to happen very soon. Very, very soon. The world would be overcome with war and famine and environmental disasters, both of our own making and through the natural world, like volcanoes and stuff. According to them, the only place that could survive this was Quebec. That's why so many members went there. That's why I said, you'll understand. That's why they changed the headquarters. I'm not sure why they focused on Quebec. Probably because they thought they could gain more members that way. In Quebec, it would have been seen as something newer, right? So less people knew about the fraud and were questioning about the money. New victims, if you will. He went one step further at this point in time, though, and added this cosmic element. So those who were able to survive the end of days would leave their bodies through a ritual of purification through fire. And as pure beings, they would then have the ability or the privilege of leaving the earth to get to the dog star Sirius, where they would quote achieve spiritual transformation. And the purification process through fire is called transition or transitioning. The only way to be purified was to go through this transition, and then you're reborn, and you can help repopulate the earth. I guess, guys. So DeMombro grew hungrier for power and authority. The more people that came in, the more he wanted to control them. And apparently some members at this point in time, this would be like still the early 90s, 91, 92, members were starting to see him as being far too authoritarian. Every year that went by, or every little while that went by, he got more and more authoritarian. And actually members, not to his face, would refer to him, some of them would refer to him as the dictator. A lot of people were coerced to do whatever he said, no matter how like humiliating and degrading and awful it was, because he had that control over him and because he was so authoritative. I'm not sure what punishments. I'm sure there were punishments, guys. We'll touch on that a little bit, but I'm not sure what he did to members who didn't follow, but he became more authoritarian. So he was, like I said before, he was in charge of the rituals, the indoctrination, and the ceremonies that the cult led. Jure was just a mouthpiece, if you will. He was almost like a prophet, okay? He was just a mouthpiece for Jure, or for Demambro. He still had power within the group, although it seems like it was more Demambro that did. That's just my thoughts, though, guys. I can't be certain. So he also guided members in their prayers and their meditation and relaxation relaxation techniques as well. He did everything just behind the scenes, you know. Jure was just the face. He was just the public face, the public relations. He would handle that. That's basically what he did. Oh, and I guess the sexing. I'm not sure. In order to emphasize his importance, though, because remember, at this point in time, you got Jure saying that he's the third reincarnation of Christ. So in order to make himself basically on the level, he told members that his son, I believe it was his firstborn son, and his name is Eli. He told them that his son was actually born through something called, I'm sorry guys, I'm also not good at this, through something called theogamy, which is basically a marriage between gods. However, he changed it to suit his needs and just God, right? Doesn't appear that he was the one that was married to God. Maybe we're to assume that it was Eli's mother. Basically, he's half God. That's what we're supposed to believe. And therefore very holy and more knowledgeable about religious things than everybody else. He also said that his daughter Emmanuel, who we talked about as the cosmic child, he just kept telling the people that she was immaculate conception. She was completely an immaculate conception. I'm not sure how many kids he actually had, guys, but those are the two he focused on, so I'm going to assume they were the oldest. By the early 90s, a lot of members were starting to become disillusioned. First of all, where's the end of days? You keep saying there's going to be an end of days. There isn't one happening. People are starting to get suspicious. Not only that, but they were suspicious about where their money was going. They didn't see anything really concrete, so they wanted to know. One former member who only joined the cult because her husband had, said the cult was no longer about religious unity and spirituality and taking over of the secular world. Overtaking the secular world. It was now more about blatantly making money or taking money from the, quote, wealthy rubes, end quote, who joined. There's a woman named Rosemary Klaus, or Klaus, C-L-A-U-S. She and her husband lost about $500,000 to the cult. Most of it was sunk into this organic farming scheme. There's where the survivalist stuff comes in. So of course, with the end of days upon us, we're going to have to start stockpiling, etc., etc., etc. And we're going to have to find a way to take care of ourselves, right? We won't have industry anymore to provide us with food, so we have to make our own foods, etc., etc., etc. This organic farm didn't do well, apparently, but that's where their money had gone to, and it apparently had failed. I'm not sure. It apparently had. And this was in Trois-Rivières, Quebec. So some members actually lost millions of dollars, though, guys. And people want to know where their money is. Rosemary herself actually defected in 1993 because, quote, this is her saying, Jure thinks he's Christ, end quote. She had to leave. So people are starting to defect and cracks are forming within the religion. We have to get people to start believing us again. We have to tell them a reason why the end of days hasn't happened yet, or what we've prophesied hasn't happened yet. People were very suspicious at this point in time. In 1993, Jaurès was actually arrested, and this was on illegal weapons charges. Not a lot is mentioned about guns, so to speak, and how many they may have amassed, but he was arrested for this. And this further tarnished his persona to people. He now has this charge on him. His credibility is not great. Neither of them really have the credibility. So in order to reestablish credibility, he started telling people that the earth was actually just an illusion and that the only hope that they had to survive in any area was to go through the transition. Then after they went through the purification transition, they would be reborn on an unnamed planet orbiting the Sirius star. At this point in time, a few more members leave. Many of them were now starting to demand that the group that the leaders actually hold a meeting and tell them where their money was going. They wanted to know what their money was being used on and where it was going. The group started to splinter as well at this point in time. Now, de Mombro and Jaurès still had a core group of followers who believed in them. They were questioning where their money was going, but they still had a core group of believers. At this point in time, though, many members, it would seem, have detracted. They've gone. Jaurès was actually replaced as the head of his own sect by a man named Robert Falardieu. So definite some splintering, some bad stuff going on here. De Mombro and Jaurès, of course, knew all about what was going on, and they're probably panicking at this time because they don't want to have to account for things. So they all decided, well, the two of them decided that because so many people are questioning us, even the most faithful of our people kind of want to still have a meeting to see where their money is going. Now's the time to start the transition. So on or about October 4th of 1994, and actually, I'm going to say it was more towards the end of September. Most reports had this actual event taking place on September 30th of 1994. De Mombro ordered two of his most loyal members, Joel Egger and Dominique Belleton, to start the transition. So the pair allegedly went to the home of three members. Their names were Antonio, so he calls himself Tony. We're just going to be referring to him as Tony. Destois, his wife, Nikki Robinson, sometimes she's also called Nikki Destois, and their 3-month-old son, Emmanuel. They went to their house and they stabbed them to death. There are reasons. The reason de Mombro gave his group was because, or at least gave these people, the reason was because Emmanuel, the baby, was the Antichrist. Mm-hmm. He told everybody that. He was secretly jealous. He was like really upset that they chose to call their son a name that was so close to their daughter, his own daughter's name. That would signify that he was holy and only his kids can be holy, so they had to go. The other reason that he specifically targeted them was that Tony had actually told members, just certain members, not all of them, that he was ordered by de Mombro to put holographic devices and listening devices and devices that would make noises, things like that. He was actually ordered to do this, put them in the lodges, so that when the people thought that they were seeing miracles, they thought that they were seeing actual miracles that would only be revealed to the group. They believed they were seeing them, but it was actually just a big illusion. It was just all a big trick. People would believe it, and they had no idea until they were told by Tony that it was set up that way. And of course, at this point in time, people are really mad because now you're really, really messing with people's spirituality as well. And that's what most of them joined for, right? this was his way. And of course, like the visions and the miracles weren't even introduced, I don't think, until like 1993. And this was a way to ensure that some of the members would stay, let's just say. And of course, at this point in time, more people wanted to defect, but because he was seen as both a traitor and because Demambro wanted revenge, he sent these people to stab them. Tony was stabbed a total of, I believe it was 40 times. Just give me 1 second, guys. Sorry, guys. I think he was stabbed a total of, it was either 40 or 50 times, guys. I think it was 40 times. Nikki was stabbed 8 times. And their son, their baby, was stabbed 6 times with a wooden stake. You know, like vampire, wooden stake. At this point in time, though, yeah, it's confusing. Demambro's own children, namely Emmanuel and Eli, were also calling bullshit. Emmanuel had become rebellious. She was off doing her own thing. She doesn't want any part of this cosmic child crap. Eli, who was supposed to be, he'd be like the leader de facto, right? Like after Demambro dies, he'd enter the family business, so to speak. He actually had serious concerns about the cult starting from when he was pretty young until when he grew. It wasn't making a lot of sense to him. And the older he got, the more skeptical of the group's interests he became. So when word got around that the visions and miracles that people thought they were seeing were no more than just holographics that his own father had ordered to be set up, he completely lost interest and he decided to defect from the group. This was another blow to Demambro's credibility too, right, guys? My own kids won't even stay. Like, come on. So on or about October 3rd, 4th, Demambro himself led an actual Last Supper. Yeah, you got it, guys. He and 12 of his closest apostles decided to have a traditional Last Supper and go through all that stuff. And they were well aware, all of them were well aware that the transition was happening, was imminent, was going to happen now. Yeah, he had 12 apostles and he was the representation of Jesus. And it was there that, I'm going to use the term, they drank the flavor aid, they poisoned themselves. So on October 3rd in 1994, a huge blaze broke out at a chalet in Marin Heights, Quebec. When police were able to enter the building, let's just say, they found 2 dead bodies. And these were the really terribly charred bodies of both Jerry and Colette Genoud. They were Swiss citizens. They had come over from Europe, and they were members of the cult. I don't know if police knew it exactly at that point in time, but they were Swiss members. Police originally were baffled because they thought maybe this was some type of murder-suicide, right? They didn't know if this was actual suicide because they wanted to, or if it was murder. Then on the 4th, the Dutoit home was set on fire. And of course, after it went out, because these were really huge blazes apparently, police once again were able to enter in and they found the 3 bodies, but they were terribly charred as well. And at this point in time, they were unsure if it was some type of murder-suicide pact. These fires too, guys, were like within hours of each other. So on October 5th, 1994, a raging inferno broke out at a farmhouse in Chery, Switzerland. When police entered, it must not have burned as badly as the other areas. When they entered, they found a really bizarre sight. So the garage itself had been turned into some type of lodge, guys. It had been turned into some type of altar. Crimson fabric draped the walls, and there was a whole bunch of mirrors in between them. And a radio. Oh, there were a bunch of colored, like fairy lights, Christmas lights, different colors that were up to add more of an effect. And there was a radio that was actually attached to the garage door, playing someone's sermons, someone's very long sermons on astrology. So they're pretty curious at this point in time. When they looked down, 23 bodies were arranged in what has been described as both a sun pattern and also a star pattern on the floor. I believe their heads were out, guys, and their feet were the ones that were inside. It was almost like they were foot to foot, as far as I can tell. Some were wearing the ceremonial robes and hoods. 20 of the bodies were shot in the head. A further 9 of those bodies actually had plastic bags also wrapped around their heads underneath their hoods. And all had drugs and tranquilizers in their systems. And Falardo, remember the guy that wrested control away from Jarrett? He was actually one of the victims that were there. He was actually the mayor of Richelieu, Quebec. I don't know how he ended up in Switzerland, but I'm just saying. It was a very weird sight, something that they hadn't seen before. And they were police in Switzerland were baffled too, wondering if this was some type of Jonestown, some type of murder-suicide pact. Just give me 1 second, guys. I'm going to see if I can pull up a couple pictures. Yeah. So the guy we're looking at right there with the child, I think that's DeMambro. And there's just some of the things. I hope you guys can see that well enough. With the red and the crimson. It looks like those were the main colors, right? It seems like they'd be Knight Templar colors, so probably. So on October 5th, 2 more fires also broke out that same day. 160 kilometers away from the original fire. And this was less than 1 hour after that original Swiss fire. This would be in Grange-sur-Salvan. So 2 more fires, 2 more chalets. 25 more bodies were located within the ruins of these chalets. So at this point, guys, if you're counting, 53 people are now dead in similar circumstances. And I'm guessing because of everything, Switzerland had more of a body count, I guess, at that point in time. So Swiss police started thinking that there was a connection. And I think Quebec police started to see that a little bit later on once they heard about Switzerland. They were dying under similar circumstances, and these chalets were going up in fire. And also, the members that were involved were civil servants. Like I said, one of them was the mayor. I'm pretty sure it was Falardo. I think he was the mayor of Richelieu, Quebec. There was also a journalist from Le Journal de Quebec. They were all involved in this. So Swiss police, of course, were convinced that the deaths were all connected. And due to the weapons charge and also the fact that he had looked into communism, they assumed that Jaurès was somehow involved. Police, after that weapons charge, started watching both him and the group. So they did have some idea. Plus, with all those charges in Quebec too, right? Where they were, it was assumed that they had tried to bomb things. It was at that, and we're making threatening calls. The police are watching this group pretty good at this point in time. And also, police were able to discover that the victims were either members or former members of the order. They did find in the Grange-sur-Salvan, in the chalets that burned there, police were able to find letters written by Jaurès and DeMambro that stated the members, quote, died in joy and plenitude, end quote. So once again, police were pretty sure this was a Jonestown situation. However, 5 of the dead in that village were children, including a 4-year-old. They also had a 3-month-old baby dead in Quebec. How did they commit suicide? So people are starting to question. Police are starting to think that it doesn't seem like every single member did this, especially when they found out that some of them were former members. They did later learn when they did an autopsy of the Dutois that they were obviously murdered guys. They learned, they didn't know it that day, but they were able to find the stab marks on them. So definitely they knew that at least those 3 for sure had been murdered. But most victims were so burned that they were pretty much unidentifiable. Maybe they had certain pieces that they could identify them with. I'm not sure. That's what they said. So at this point in time, police were unaware if the leaders were actually dead. Like I said, they were having a hard time IDing everybody, or if they were on the run. So they put in an APB for them, right? On Interpol and everything, looking for these 2 men because they were the prime suspects in the murders, suicide, arsons. They did, however, eventually they were able to ID both of the men. As far as I know, they both died in the Grange sur Selvon fires. They were able to find de Mombreau's body for sure, though. And he, of course, died by poisoning because, you know. So within days, they drank it at the Last Supper, guys. Within days, police were able to ascertain that the Dutois murders were actually the catalyst for the event, the first strike in the war of who would gain or keep control over the cult. And they did have some testimony from former members too, talking about what the group had been up to. Police believed some of the deaths were a, quote, purge of threats, end quote, on the leadership. And like I said before, they knew that not all members died willingly, especially a 3-month-old and a 4-year-old, but also de Mombreau's own son, Eli, was in there. He was supposed to have defected. So police believe, or at least other former members believed, that he was either kept there, as in not let go, or that they had like lured him back and killed him, or just maybe outright killed him there. In the second fire in Switzerland, police were able to identify Emmanuelle as well. So she is gone too. And, the 2 people that killed the Dutois were also found in one of the Swiss fires. So a tape was found in one of the ruins, and this would be in the Grange sur Selvon fires, of a conversation between de Mombreau and Jaurès. So I'm going to recount it for you. Quote, de Mombreau said, "People have beaten us to the punch, you know." Jaurès answered, "Well, yeah, Waco beat us to the punch." De Mombreau then said, "In my opinion, we should have gone 6 months before them. What we'll do will be even more spectacular," end quote. So they knew right from the beginning that they were planning to do this. And apparently they wanted to make their cult even more well known. So letters were also located in some of the burned ruins. I'm really not sure how they found them, guys, but letters were also located in some of the burned ruins saying, they were thought of as goodbye letters from the members, and they basically said, quote, they believed they were leaving to escape the hypocrisies and oppression of the world, end quote. They were also able to ascertain, both police forces were able to ascertain that the fires had been set from a different location by remote control. And even though the leaders were dead, the cult still lived on. Okay. On December 23rd, 1995, 16 more bodies were found in the Vercors Mountains of France. They were arranged in that sun or star-shaped pattern again. They had bags over their head. They had also been drugged and shot. At least 2 of the members had shot the other members and then had committed suicide, but it could have been because the other members wanted them to. I'm not completely sure. One of the bodies that was there, because remember I said they had some pretty famous people, was a woman named Edith Bonlieu, and she had been a competitor in the 1956 Winter Olympics. On March 23rd, 1997, in Saint Casimir, Quebec, police responded to another fire. Once it was doused, 5 more bodies were found. However, police were able to locate in a back shed 3 children ranging in age from, I believe they were 13, 14, and 16, that were able to give them some account of what had gone on. The 3 children told them that they were drugged, and these kids were drugged. They were pretty heavily drugged, but they were able to come out of the shed. They were drugged, and then their parents told them that they wanted them to commit suicide along with them. So they knew that the 5 inside had died of their own hand. Basically, they wanted to. They wanted their children to commit suicide along with them. Somehow the kids were able to escape, and that's how we have a little bit more information. However, their parents were dead. So as of today, 74 members have died either by suicide or murder or combination. Police do believe, though, that most of the members that were dead died because of murder. They died at the hands of other people. Though they do believe that some of them, Demambro, Jaurès, his 12 apostles, certain other members within the group, probably the people he sent to kill the Dutois, people that were hardcore believers, they believed that they had definitely transitioned themselves, whereas police believed that most other members that weren't involved in that core inner group were killed, were murdered. Mostly so that they could prove to them that their rhetoric wasn't fake, even though it was. And so that they wouldn't have to face anything, I guess. And because they wanted power and control and everything else. However, there were some less charred bodies that police were able to take out. I think it was particularly in this fire, where police noted signs of past bruising and fresh bruising, let's just say. And it apparently, this quote suggested prior and prolonged violence had been visited on them, end quote. So like I said, I don't know enough about if they were beating people or their punishment practices to say for sure. A man named Michel Tobotnik, okay, I hope I said it right. He's actually a renowned Swiss musician and conductor, had been affiliated with the group. He was actually a member. He was arrested in the late 90s for being a leader. I don't know if he ever actually was, but they arrested him. They wanted to hold somebody responsible for this. He was actually indicted for, quote, participation in a criminal organization, end quote, and murder. So he went on trial in 2001 in France, but was actually acquitted. There's no real evidence. However, it was also from his trial that we learned more of the inner workings of the members. He did say a whole lot more about the inner workings of the cult. I'm not sure how high up ranking he was. Maybe he had reached 3rd tier. I don't know, guys. But he, like I said, he told about some of the cults and some of the practices that were in the cult and how membership was decided, etc. Former living members at this point in time also started telling their stories too. So the world found out a little bit about it, just not a lot. The verdict was appealed, of course, by the French courts, but he was, in like 2006, he was acquitted again. He didn't start the cult. He was just there. So that's it, guys. That's the story of the Order of the Solar Temple. It's a lot, and there were a lot of different things involved, and it took us a long time to get to the actual point of it all. But yes, a megalomaniac and a sex fiend came together to form a cult so they could find a lot of partners and get a lot of power and finances. I still say that Demambro was maybe craftier than Jaurès. You know what I mean? I think he let Jaurès believe that he was a second leader, but he sounds more like a right-hand man. I'm just saying, those are my beliefs. What do you guys think? I'll leave you with this though. Just let me think what you know, or just let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you guys know any further information I maybe didn't add in. But I'll leave you with this. No one knows for sure if this cult is still in existence. There were websites that said it's possible that this group exists in Spain, a small sect of 150 people or so. There were also rumors that the headquarters is now back in Zurich, Switzerland. We won't know for sure unless people come out and start telling us about their experiences, or unless there's another transition. So that's all for now. It's a lot. This one's going to be a long one. Sorry, guys. Next week, we're going to be talking about a historical case, or in the next little bit. Trust me, it's a good one, though. It's been in the news recently. There's a hint for you. I hope you guys have a really good next few days, and I will see you later. Bye for now.